important slide. We have key performance indicators in our strategic plan. However, we like to highlight and focus on these that impact students directly and the data that we get from our students. So we always emphasize this slide by calling out sense of belonging, which is a part of the engagement belonging goal in our school improvement plans. And we want to make sure that we focus on early learning to meet all 6 kindergarten readiness skills, very important, and percentage of students in grades K-8 who are at or above grade level in reading. We still do have a literacy focus for our district this year. That's a continuation from last year. So yes, we do focus on math, but we're highlighting reading again this year, and the percentage of students on track for graduation. As you know, we have a strong sense of urgency around that, and the percentage of students on track for credits earned grades 9 through 12. So all of these will be reflected in one way or another in the different levels of school improvement plans that we'll be reviewing this Friday in the folder.
So, I know a question has come up among us as to where we find the numbers that are attached to these percentages in terms of goals.
You'll find it in the school improvement plans. In our key performance indicators, it's just a guide, and we shift the percentages, the baseline, and the desired outcome. And I'll be going over the SMARTY goals that we have and how we determine the percentage increases, decreases, and all of that. And I know that's a question that all of you have, and it's an important question. And we've had some narrative around that, but I'd like to share some research about what is expected of all of us. And some schools will be outliers. I know one school is trying to jump from 20-some% in iReady reading to 60-some% by the end of the year. And it's because they do have historical data of making that kind of jump.
Oh.
So they're confident that they want to have that lofty goal. I looked at it and thought, is this a realistic goal or not? And the explanation from school staff and the principal was that we've done it before. If we push ourselves, I think we can do it again. So they're creating some lofty goals this year.
I prefer that to 2%.
Exactly. And so before we get started, we do these fun activities, to check in with each other. On this sheet scale, how do you feel today? So I'd like for you to turn to a partner. You don't have to show them the whole group. Pick a number, pick a picture of the sheet, and be honest and say, I'm number 4 today, and that's okay.
Oh, great. Probably number 4 today.
Number 4.
Yeah.
What
3. Number 3.
What's your favorite sheet?
I like 3.
Really? It's interesting how people,
I feel like 6 is kind of sweet.
It's great.
Mostly on there. I like activities.
C jump
I think the weather's gonna be kind of settled now.
Like 3.
I like to
I'm gonna go like that.
Am I chose 9. All right. And there's lots of different animals that we do this with in some of our professional learning settings. We want our leaders and our staff to be able to tell each other how they are and to be able to check in and explain why they're where they are and where they want to be. I said I was number 9. I'm a little bit frolicky today. I'd like to be number 2. Greg said he's number 4. He's looking for a bucket.
Is that like on your bucket list?
Yeah. We don't have a bucket here, so sorry. Okay, so the desired outcomes for tonight. We want to review our support plan for school principals, because that's an important conversation to have. When we think about school improvement plans, you want to know who's supporting the school leaders, what kind of feedback do we give them, and how often do we meet with them. So we're going to have some information for that, and then we want to understand SMART goals, or SMART goals, and I'll explain what the IE means in the SMART goal. It's just a review. Many of you know what a SMART goal is, but I think we need to get calibrated as we're starting our new SIP cycle. We want to review the new SIP template. It's different from last year, and I'm going to go over section by section what the expectations were and what we're going to be seeing. And then Q&A. It's at the end, but please feel free to just ask questions when you feel the need. Embedded questions are just Any questions about the expectations tonight? Okay, there we go. So principal supervision. We have 2 principal supervisors for the 24-25 school year, which is different from previous years. Greg and Helen, also known as Grelin. We put our, I didn't put Grelin because I don't know how comfortable Greg feels about being Grelin. But I keep pushing it on him.
They put him first.
Yeah, I did. I respect, he's taller than me, so I just thought, hey. Or it could have been Helig, which is really weird.
Yeah.
So Grelin, we support 17 school principals this year each. We support them through the evaluation cycle, meaning the evaluation cycle for a school leader involves having a goal setting meeting in the fall, talk about some goals that they want to set, tied to their evaluation, not just necessarily the school improvement plan. And then we have a mid-year evaluation meeting, which is not required by the state, but we do require it at Edmonds to be able to progress monitor what the goals and the data is showing us at that time. It's around March. And then at the end of the year, around late April, May, we have final evaluation meetings where we're using the AWSP framework to talk about the criteria of leadership and all the domains and et cetera, to do an overview of their progress over the year as a school leader. And then we do in-person visits once per month for about an hour. And it's really all about making sure that we're talking about our problem of practice related to our SIP goal and the strategies that we're using. You could have a SIP goal, but you want to make sure that your strategies to actualize your SIP goal is robust. So Greg and I are checking in with our school leaders about course corrections, giving them feedback, having them look at school data and having conversations. It's really not a hello, it's not a friendly, a learning walk, it's really around student data. And then we do a learning walk related to the problem practice. So if something is mentioned, we want to see evidence of it in the classroom. We can talk about goals and data all day long, but we need to see that it's impacting our students directly. And we like to get feedback from our teaching staff about how things are going. And then we have monthly principal learning networks. This is small groups of principals getting together in a particular school, visiting each other's schools. It's 2 hours in length, and we have a scope and sequence of what they want to learn as school leaders to help them be better stewards of all the responsibilities as an instructional leader and a manager of operations and all those things. We want to make sure that we're supporting them well. So our principals get together and they write out, after a discussion, of things that they want to learn to help them actualize their school improvement plan. So it's all related and it's all embedded in the strategic plan.
I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
I'm curious, how did you guys decide which schools you would each be supervising? Or maybe this was with Rebecca as well?
Well, it was a joint group. To the extent possible, we wanted to keep people with stability if they had stability. Now, there were already people who had gone from Dana to Victor, you know, so, and then, but to the extent possible, we wanted principals to experience that continuity, unless there was a feeder pattern reason or something. And then the 3 of us sat down and said, well, it really makes sense that one person would have the Meadowdales, you know, so even if it means somebody's gonna get a new supervisor this year, as long as they hadn't had Dana, then Victor, and now, you know, we tried to do that.
The dual language schools, Greg has all of the dual language.
Yeah, we
schools.
did do a little bit of, yeah.
I had a few, Greg had a few, Victor had a few, and then we decided they all need to be in one principal learning network to share the problem practice. So Greg has all of the, anything else you want to add, Greg, about how we support principals?
No, I think back to the goal setting conversation, I think one of the things we really do try to stress with our principals is that the goals that they set should have an alignment with the SIP. And in much of the same way that the teachers they work with should align their goals to school improvement too. So it's about that through line of consistent focus, that principals working on these things that are gonna further the SIP, working with teachers to do these things that are gonna further the SIP. And it all connects back to the district strategic plan, going back to those key performance indicators we shared at the very beginning. It's about that linear, you know, everybody pulling in the same direction from the district to the school to the classrooms.
And they all have schools across the K-12 continuum.
Okay.
And so that's giving us, and therefore they both attend the secondary leadership team meetings, the district leadership team meetings, and the elementary leadership team meetings, which gives us a greater, sense of alignment, I would say, across the system, versus sometimes there can be a little bit of a disconnect. I mean, there are pluses to doing it that way too, but, this way that they're very much aligned in all things.
I started off with supporting only elementary schools here. I started with 22, I think, year one. And it's been really nice to be able to collaborate around grading practices, to graduate, and being in those spaces with Greg. So,
The whole time that I worked in the district, it was separated.
By
One
lines.
assistant superintendent over elementary and one over secondary for 20 years.
so we both have 2 comprehensive high schools, 2 middle schools, and with elementaries. Each have a K-8. So we're very mindful about how can we divide the group so that we can be aligned. Alignment is really key. We don't want to tell one principal something and another something else, and everyone's confused. We have very similar expectations. We set up the learning networks in a way that, you know, if you go to any one of ours, it wouldn't be unfamiliar to you, and the expectations are the same.
My other question, when you visit schools and you walk through classrooms and you see things perhaps that aren't the best teaching practices going on, or students not engaged, how do you handle it?
Well, I always start about, you know, how do we give feedback? How do we give that feedback to our staff and also our principals and to each other? How do I give Greg feedback, and how does Greg give me feedback, and Rebecca included? So it's really about the feedback cycle and the expectations of feedback and our comfort level of what feedback is versus a compliment versus something we call constructive criticism or whatever it may be. So we try to ask questions about what we're seeing. So one of the things that I walk away with is if I see
To
something
the principal.
to the principal, and I'm walking away to another classroom, I would say, what kind of feedback would you give during this 10-minute snippet that we saw together? And then we have a conversation about that. And if you are gonna give that feedback, what is the desired outcome, and how are you gonna follow through? And is your feedback going to be actionable, specific, and timely? Those 3 things I really try to emphasize. If it's not specific, if it's not timely, and it's not actionable, don't say it. There's no reason. You're probably gonna upset the person, and it just goes sideways. And then have a feedback loop where you're gonna follow up and say, I remember talking to you about this, and I'm wondering how that's going. Can I come and take another look? I'm really excited to see your next step. And having a strength-based lens when they're giving feedback, so that's some of the things that we talk about during the one-on-one sessions and also the principal learning network. And sometimes the power of the group helps. If all the 10 schools that are getting together decide that this is gonna be our problem practice, and we're gonna take this back to our staff, and we're gonna say, these are the steps that we're gonna take to actualize our goals and whatnot, and guess what? 9 other schools are doing this with us, so we can share practice. That's even better, so you don't feel like you're in a building in isolation and no one else is doing this, no other principal is saying this but your own. We want to get away from that practice, we wanna make sure that we're all on the same page. So I couch it as that kind of, if it's something egregious, and it's something that we need to work on right away, because we saw some kind of behavior or explanation that isn't right, and it's not aligned with our values and whatnot, then I literally pulled out the teacher and had conversations and said that we need to follow up.
To what extent do you then have opportunities for you to follow up with the principal as to what happened with the feedback to the teacher, and have they seen any changes in it?
Every month we do that.
Yeah,
So you keep track of who, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And at the end of PLS, we always try to report commitments. What are you committed to doing as an action next step? And then we overlook that. So you committed to doing this, there's a spreadsheet. You committed to doing this, now we're back, a month later. What happened? Give us an update. And then they help each other.
To what extent have you seen improvements?
I've seen the most improvement in the last couple of years with alignment and expectations.
Okay.
Especially with curriculum.
Yeah, I think at the secondary level, we're actually seeing the most improvement is in the implementation of the strategy that we're using to move grad rate. And I think this year the focus is really truly on that granular student by student. You mentioned in the board meeting last spring, or last winter, when we were talking about grad rate, the power of the relationship and knowing the student. And I think that's where we're at this year, is really getting that granular about what's the plan for each kid. And so those are the things we're holding them accountable to, and we're starting to see that come to life as buildings are learning and developing.
And the collaboration piece, it's not just about instruction, but it's in that classroom. What we try to ask is, how are you partnering with librarians? How are you partnering with the Tab Lab funded teachers? What are you doing with other people in this building to support our students, but not in isolation?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes. How are Early Childhood Center, subscribers, Edmonds High's e-learning, where do they all fit in?
They're all part of it.
They're all
So
part of it.
next month, as a matter of fact, we're going to be meeting at e-learning. The secondary pillar is going to meet at e-learning, and we're going to do a deep dive into the data around our credit recovery efforts, because we'll have first quarter data. So I think they fit right in. And Edmonds Heights is a great example, because there's this, I used to call it sanity when I was principal. I never really knew what happened on that campus, right? It was just this magical place. And then I got up there and I saw that it's a school, and there's classrooms, and there's kids in classes, and there's instruction, and there's learning happening. And I think sometimes it almost demystifies that a little bit to see what happens. And the same thing with Schwab. I mean, again, it's an alternative program, but at the end of the day, kids are in classes having relationships with teachers, and they're learning content. They're learning about different subjects. And so I think they fit in just as well as anybody else into the system of our programs.
So they're just part of your 17 schools?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Ironically, last year their play was Saturday, right?
All right.
I was there. It was exciting, and on roller skates, which I did not expect.
Oh, wow. So we're now gonna move into talking about our SIP SMARTY goals. And our SMARTY goals mean strategic, measurable, ambitious, realistic, time-bound, inclusive, and equitable. The IE is included so that we have an equitable lens as we're setting our goals and thinking about our subset students, groups of students, and how we can move smaller groups of students as we move the whole system towards one good direction. And as we talk about the data, these are some sample reflection questions that we ask of schools. We want them to use their school data to answer some of these questions. And we have staff members and grade level teams and departments talking about these things. What trends or patterns do you see in your data? What are your initial thoughts or reactions? Data is quite personal, just like grading is quite personal. So teachers get a gut reaction, either way. Whether the data is looking great to them or, it's not so great to them. And so we want them to be able to discuss those feelings too. And so we want them to think about, what are your initial thoughts or reactions? Which students are making satisfactory progress toward desired outcomes, and which students are we not serving well, and they're not making progress as we would like them to. And what do you do about it once you notice that in the data? Does the data indicate a need to adjust core instruction? Our focus related to multi-tier systems of support is to make sure that first-time teaching, when you first teach something, it's really excellent teaching. And when a kid receives that first-time teaching, it's excellent learning on their part. It's not just great teaching, it's excellent learning too. So what is high quality teaching and learning look like? And how do we make sure that we're making course corrections so that happens? So you don't have to have that remedial class. You don't have to go to summer school. You don't have to have the tier 2, tier 3 interventions and then try to intervene ourselves out of a tier 1 problem, thinking that if we have more support, if we have more money, if we have more this and that, then it'll solve our problems. But when we think about first-time teaching, if it's really quality, kids will respond. And so that's what we want to focus on. And what are you surprised to see? That's a question that we always want our school staff to talk about as well. And then we give our
If you can go back to one, or you don't have to go back, but I think these are not dissimilar to what we talked about. We finished up all of one of our data chats.
Yes.
And those were a nice way, although they weren't designed as part of these contacts with the school supervisor. We did have school supervisor and myself, and 90% of them, John Bell and Jason were actually able to sit in with us too. And so, these are not dissimilar to the types of things we asked them there. In some cases, it was more pointed because we looked at their data in advance to say, gosh, we noticed this big dip, or this big gain, or, very much focused on, a little bit more granular than like trends or patterns, but just a good chance to dive in there with them.
I know that, trying to think about in the past, those kinds of, the MTSS or conversations, MTI, it used to be called, were sort of in levels. So what do you see in your school level data when the full faculty were together? What do you see in your class, in grade level? What do you see in your classroom? And then within your classroom, small groups or individuals. So I'm assuming that those same kinds of, does this level in the classroom look same or different than the school? If it looks different, why do you think that is? If it's the same, but it's not good, why, or that kind of thing.
And having effective teams in schools, like building leadership team, we talk about the whole school. data,
Exactly.
And then present that data to the rest of the staff. And then grade level teams or departments can do other things about their students that they're serving. So it's, I don't think staff can do all of it, but if we have teams of people having those conversations and leading the learning, that's more beneficial.
Yep.
With the time constraints that we have. And then, we want to also focus on our problems of practice, and we like to call it a problem, we don't like to sugarcoat it and make it a challenge in this moment. It's a problem, and it's okay to say we have a problem. We have a graduate problem, it's okay to say that, and problems get fixed all the time, so that's fine. So we wanna say, why does this problem occur and reoccur? When you look at the data, you're gonna see some problems, and it's okay to call them that. Who is affected by this problem, who is not affected by this problem? We can't think that everyone's affected in the same way, all groups of kids and staff. Where is this, does this problem occur, and then when, and all of those things that you see in this time. To have some direct conversations.
I have a question.
Yes.
Speaking of your problems to are principals and all staff aware of how we're comparing to districts around us?
Yes, we've had, district leadership team meetings where we had information shared out, not just grad grades, but SBA and attendance, our neighboring friends, yes.
I mean, we have less control over the all in that question, our principals were, I would say acutely, yes. They should be very aware of those. We've been talking about it since last spring in very deliberate ways.
Technology staff, I'm not quite sure if they probably decide, but I know that they're moving.
Right, I mean,
close to their heart.
Yeah, I mean, to what extent do the principals then talk to all their staff, all their teaching staff at the buildings?
More often about other schools in our district, I would say, than sharing like Edmonds School District, versus other school districts. They're more likely to say, and I've heard some of them say, well, I found the comparator schools in our district who are most similar to us, and I compared with those. Or, so I can't really say that all of our grad rate, I think people may have an idea of, but, in comparative districts. But I would say like SBA, third grade teachers probably don't know globally how we compare to other third grades as a district, but as their school compares with others, I would say probably. Or with, certainly with the state.
So, moving on to our SIP goal expectations. So in the SIP, you'll find that our elementary and middle schools will have a literacy and a math home. And the literacy goal is the Washington State Smarter Balance Assessments. And the math goal also. So you'll see a goal that's around SBA. We have not had that here last year, in the last couple of years. We used that already. We're shifting to SBA because expectation is that if we do well in one assessment, then we should impact other assessments and whatnot. That's kind of our theory of action. And many districts use SBA. And I think it was strategic for us to focus on iReady the first year because as people people were learning and learning how to disaggregate the data and do the data mining, the software that we provided. So I think it's really beneficial learning. So we're gonna see SBA this year as the 3-year goal.
And there's a very practical version of that too. That's what we're held accountable to.
Right.
At the end of the day, nobody, I mean, we can talk all we want about our already scores, but what gets published in the paper
Is SBA.
is SBA. What gets published in the paper is our on-time record.
Absolutely.
So we need to hold ourselves accountable to those same things, because those are the things that we're being measured.
Oh, agreed.
So-
I read it as a tool.
Yeah.
I read it as a tool to help us
It's a
get
progress
kids
monitoring
to meeting
tool.
standard. SBA is the measure of meeting standard. It's the accepted measure of meeting standard.
So you're gonna see that change in our school improvement plan. So if you see multiple lines of SMART goals, is because there's one for, you'll see it later, there's one for SBA, and then progress monitoring is the higher ed piece. Okay. Is the high school?
Do they use interim assessments at all? Because those
It's like they said, hey Nancy, here's a question you asked,
Yeah.
which you could ask, which we didn't, but,
Yeah, that actually is that's coming up, a lot this year. I mean, we're having a lot of discussions around the IEDs and how those are going to fit into our strategies, because I think they are a strategy that we need to go back to and lean on.
We're having some serious conversations with Jason and student learning about how do we elevate that? How do we elevate that? So more to come on that. We still need to have some conversations and think it through. And I'm also interested in seeing, how other districts around us are doing with that. And they seem to have clear systems and structures and district mandated expectations around that. And so we're exploring that. So more to come on that.
But I will share that you'll see in some of the SIPs, you will see IABs as a strategy that some
Good.
schools are already making.
You'll see that this year.
You know, they're really good. The problem that I recall, which isn't to be surprised, is some of them have open-ended, they're open-ended and teachers have to spend time scoring them. And if we had time for professional development and scoring workshops like we used to, but I know we don't have the money for them now, it's very powerful work, and teachers will do it when they have that time to sit and score with their colleagues, and it's great. But without that, they're like, I don't have the time to do this, or they don't feel like they're calibrating, because when you're scoring open-ended, it's harder. There are some of the interim assessments that are all multiple choice, and so I remember going through them and finding them and saying, we'll do these, and so we could get them to be more willing to do those, and that was very helpful. But I think we can count on them being aligned to the SBA. We can't count on the iReady necessarily being aligned to the SBA.
Right.
One of our principals, who's in her second year, is from Everett, and she talked about how Everett does, they lean really heavily on IEDs and iReady, and that's their culture, and that's.
It's a mandated assessment in the
Mandated.
springtime for them.
The IAB.
Yeah, and they take off iReady so that people can do the IAB.
That's right.
So we're having conversations.
Okay, that's good.
It's
And
kind of-
having someone, because look at Everett. Everett has great scores compared to us, and they have for years. So,
And it's not teaching to the test, as we know. We
But,
just want to
yeah.
make that clear.
I know that it's hard because it will require professional development again. We did a bunch when they first came out, but that was years ago. So, anyway, okay, just curious.
I'll tap you for some advice about that, okay? Moving on to high school graduation on track for graduation, those things you're going to see on the SIPs, on-time graduation rates, and then you'll see definitely ninth grade on track percentages as SMART goals. For all grades, everybody has engagement or belonging. Our secondary schools and some of our elementary schools, you'll see attendance as the data measure. They're saying if you feel like you belong, you should come to school. And so our high schools and middle schools are doing that. We do have our district student survey this year, and other, meaning some of our, in our elementary schools, some of our K-2 teachers want to know how the little ones are feeling a sense of belonging, and they created their own, just to use at the site level and not report to us, and it's really helpful. Kindergarten teachers have created smiley faces, like all sorts of things that help children, tell us how they're doing. And so just because it's grades 3 and up, the certain surveys, our little ones are not being neglected. We have fabulous staff who are being mindful and creating their own assessments.
That's right.
I've seen some second grade ones that are really excellent.
And we used to have district-wide with K1 and 2 with smiley faces.
Oh,
Smiley this way and this way.
brown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And.
But that could be like a check-in instead of a sheep. Pick the smiley face that you're keeping. Is it a round or is it? Any questions about the goals that you're gonna see? Okay. So the SIP this year will have two things that will look new to you. It will have a SIP 3-year goal. So on top, you'll see a 3-year goal for the 24-25 to the 26-27 school year. And it's wider in scope and provides a broader and more ambitious goal. So you're gonna see some jumps in percentages that we probably haven't seen before. I think our schools are ready to take that leap. And so you're gonna see some percentage increases with some historical data. They're not just randomly choosing. They've seen some jumps and they're having these ambitious goals. I applaud them for that. And then below that, if you look at the portion, and I'll show you that in a bit, you'll see annual targets. Annual targets are like the stepping stones or stairs, and you're not gonna see that big of jumps. You're not gonna see like 20% jump by the end of the year. A few have, because they're claiming that they have done it before. So don't be alarmed, and I'll tell you which elementary schools if you'd like to, but a few have. They're usually 3 to 5% jumps, maybe 10
For
that year, for the annual. And they're all iReady. And if we don't have iReady, we need to have some kind of progress monitoring tool anyway, so we've done this design of the SIP so that it's not dependent on a diagnostic that we purchase.
Okay,
So
so
focus is
I'm
SBA.
confused.
Okay,
Oh, so the annual is using iReady, but the 3 years using SBA?
yes.
Hmm.
3-year for elementary school is using SBA.
Why?
That's our target goal. What we're trying to focus on our SIP plan is that the iReady is not a benchmark assessment. It's not at the end of the year, let's see if they're on the grade level or not. It's basically like a temperature check, and it should inform your practice. SBA is that benchmark at the end of the year, and you don't have time to do any course corrections. I think Rebecca had a great analogy about hospital or taking blood tests. It's like taking a blood test or your blood pressure check, and you do something. It's a diagnostic. If you go to a doctor, they diagnose you with something. Expectation is that you do something about that diagnosis. It's not supposed to be the end of the year. So the iReady window is shifted earlier in April so that people don't use it as, oh, I needed a little bit more time to teach and they could have done better. It was never designed to be that. It's a progress monitoring diagnostic assessment yearly and multiple times a year, because we administer the iReady assessment multiple times a year. We do SBA once a year. So having a 3-year goal saying by the end of 3 years, we're not gonna be hovering around 50 or 30%, we're gonna be well above, and here's my plan. And the way I'm gonna get there is by using this diagnostic year within multiple periods during the year, fall, spring, and whatnot, to be able to actualize my 3-year goal, which is that measurement, like you said, no one is using iReady at the state level. It's really SBA, that's our expectation.
But why wouldn't you use a benchmark sample at the end of each year up to that 3rd year? I understand the need for interim assessments, trust me, get that. But
So,
why wouldn't you use the SBA at the
Have a
end?
year, like a year,
Just
SBA, that's.
dipstick of where we are at the end of our 1st year in this 3-year process.
Mhm.
Then are we on track to meet our?
Well, it's the same premise, but it gives them 3-year flexibility to do course corrections. We've done 1-year SIP goals, probably before I came using SBA or something else. We've done 1-year SIP goals with iReady even. And what we found was people scrambling, trying to do and practice strategies within that 1 year, and then thinking, oh, I'm done, I'm gonna have to do another strategy. You have to see things through. A multi-year process and progress is really important, and we wanted people to be committed to making sure that their strategies are not just, oh, this year I'm gonna do this, next year I'm gonna do this, and by the end of the year, I have to have this SBA goal, I have to have a 10% increase. Well, I didn't do it, well, this strategy must not work, and I'm gonna try something else. We want people to be thoughtful, and a thoughtful process requires a multi-year, 3-year change process. It's not to say if some school doesn't need adequate progress, 1 year to the next in SBA, we're not sitting back and saying, well, you still have 2 more years. We're giving them feedback. We're giving them expectations that, oh, you will only make 2% increase from 1 year to the next. How are you going to make this 10% or 5% per year growth by the end of 3 years? And that creates the.
Like I said, I understand
Yeah.
the need for interim assessments. My concern is that if we get to the study session by the end of this year and I'm ready and we can ready, then you're gonna have to do something else.
Yes, and we already have something else at the elementary school level, actually. It's embedded in our units of study.
So I'm gonna piggyback on what Hawk is saying. I understand what you're saying, it makes a lot of sense. But why can't there be, first of all, we're not sure IRD and SBA correlate. We're
Right.
really not sure. It worries me that we would wait and have a 3-year SBA goal, which, like Rick said, is the accountability measure, and not be monitoring that along the way in the SIP at the same time that we're looking at iReady. So, you know, if you have the 3-year SBA goal, it's easy to divide that into thirds and say we're kind of, and even though progress we know doesn't really go incrementally like that by year. But just as a touch base, so if your iReady scores look great, but your SBA don't,
It's not correlating, yeah.
I as a principal would want my SIP to be looking at that and talking about it with my staff
At the end of the first year.
at the end of the first year, rather than, oops, we get to the 3rd year and, oh, our iReady scores look great for 3 years, but we've just lost 3 years because our SBA scores aren't meeting up.
Let me, and I'm gonna let you respond to that fully, but I know we all know that, SBA, of course, is not given in K through 2. And so that is another reason, you know, to have, or a reason, whether
Yes,
it's.
iReady isn't valid.
I know, I mean, you were gonna say that, I knew you were gonna say that, but it is given. So in order to engage everybody on the staff, when you're doing these exercises, when you're talking about your SIP, if you're relying only on SBA, there's a little bit for, what will become half of our staff. It isn't quite half of our staff right now. Right now it's 3/7 of your staff who say, well, I don't have SBA. So, I mean, I do think that that's a different way to engage our staff. You know,
I don't find that compelling enough, to be honest. We have raw kids in kindergarten, grade assessment for kindergarten. We have
Writing records.
running records, which are much better for that. I don't know if it's 2nd grade, at the end of 2nd grade, do we still give the district math assessment for place value? Because that, it was a key indicator for math at the end of 2nd grade. Are they ready to go on to 3rd grade?
So this is what I will say, because the purpose of this meeting is to go over the changes in the form. And like I said in the beginning, this form is designed not dependent on a certain purchased diagnostic. It's designed for, like you said, Director Cramer, for purposes of really tracking our progress with SBA. So if we don't have iReady, that's okay. It's not gonna make or break our SIP plan or our thinking around it. We could do exactly what Director Cramer said. Underneath, you have your 3-year lofty goal, we're gonna get there. However, now you're gonna have to have a 1 year, how are you gonna get there? And then, again, use SBA and switch it out. If we don't do that, we could also, like you said, Director Katims, we could have lockets, we could separate that out, we have running records, we have other assessments in our district that we can swap out for that 1 year progress. But it's important to have that there. We need to have a 1 year progress while we have that 3-year expectation. I don't want our school leaders and school staff to think, you just live by this 1 year at a time. No, you have to have a long range goal and then yearly marks to be able to get to that goal. And so we can change the iReady out with anything. It could be 1 year SBA, it could be walk-ins for our littles, we could be running records, it could be something different at the secondary level. it's easy to do that, but right now, we do have iReady, and it may be this year that SIP reflects the iReady, but we're gonna have to come back to the table, talk to our leaders, talk to you, maybe have a few more study sessions about what makes sense as the yearly progress. But my recommendation is that we continue with the 3-year plan. We have a multi-year strategic plan, it's not a 1-year plan. It wouldn't make sense to have a multi-year strategic plan and then expect our school leaders to think 1 year at a time. We have to think multiple years at a time and then progress monitor and be accountable every year. And then the measure, the data source for that is open for more discussion. So I can vote on it.
Everything you're saying is, totally agree, totally agree. I just think in the SIPs, there ought to be, along with the progress monitoring, just tracking annually what's happening on the SBA as well in front of people's faces, if that's the 3-year goal. And because it'll help us understand to what extent is there correlation here? To what extent is iReady?
We can,
I appreciate that feedback, and we can explore that.
well, and we can design a form that would show you, I mean, and it's all readily available, you know, we can certainly design a form.
Not so much for us, it's for the schools.
Well, and the schools are already using it. I mean, the schools are already 100%. There was one single principal who couldn't talk fluently and fluidly about their SBA and, you know, all of that. Just practicality speaking, these are done or they're due tomorrow. The principals aren't gonna be able to rewrite their SIPs in time to get them to you this year.
But I think this year will be great information gathering and data gathering about what both of you are mentioning. And then to see where we go with iReady. That is still open-ended. Once we make that decision, I'll be able to pivot quite quickly. I mean, we changed the form during the pandemic, when people didn't.
Yeah.
Right.
So I don't think what you're suggesting is not a hardship on our system at all, or for our school leaders and staff. But I need to know what's gonna happen with iReady to be able to pivot quickly. And so once that happens, then I'll be able to collaborate with our team and Rebecca and also you for more some actionable next steps. But I need to know what's gonna happen with iReady first. I can't take that off. And it's also in our assessment calendar. They're expected to use iReady, and then not to have them accountable to explain it in our SIP would be a disconnect.
The other piece that I think is really important too is that built into this process, we have a mid-year revise and reflect, and we have an end-of-year revise and reflect related to this one plan. And I think those are places where absolutely you could also then connect back into the SIP.
And you'll see
measure
that today.
the SIP progress as well, on a yearly basis. That can certainly be a component of that as well.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna fly through these slides because I really want you to see the templates.
One more question,
Yes,
for clarity. 3-year goal, are we talking 3rd grade compared to 3rd grade, compared to 3rd grade, compared to 3rd grade? Or are we talking the 3rd to 4th to 5th to 6th?
some schools, you're gonna see that they're following cohorts in their 1-year goal. Some schools, you're gonna see, they're gonna leave. If I'm tracking my 6th grade and 5th grade, they're not gonna be with me for 3 years, so it's nearly impossible to do that. And for our middle schools who have 7th and 8th grade, 2 grades, it's even harder.
Okay.
So the answer is, for some schools, you're gonna clearly see it, that, oh, I know what she's doing, I know what he's doing. That school is tracking this 4th grade, and they're starting with their 3rd graders. So there's gonna be some language in the 1-year goal. One school in particular comes to mind, they say, we're going to progress monitor our current 3rd graders, knowing that they're going to be with us for the next 3 years. Very good question. So, very quickly, because we're running out of time, and I really want you to see the forms, and the forms that Greg just mentioned about the mid-year and final year reflect and revise. So this is some current research back recommendations that we share with our school leaders, and this is what we try to follow and encourage our school leaders to look at. So we want to always review the baseline data. So in every one of our SIPs, you should have some baseline data clearly stated. In prior years, people skip that part, even though it's a SMART goal. They would say, I want to reach 75%, but we're doing now in the fall. And so you're going to see some baseline data and the desired outcome percentage as well. And we encourage them to use the recent performance data just to make it targets. And then always focusing on equity, differentiation. differentiate goals for underserved groups. And in our one-year goals, you're gonna see subset groups of students. You know, for graduates, we wanna look at all kids and helping them across the finish line, but which kids are in subset groups are not doing as well as we want them to. So you'll see multilingual students, students with special needs, and all of those things in the one-year goal. Then the best practice guidelines for the percentage growth. I know that this was wondering from many of our school board members, past and present. We focus on incremental and realistic increases, and I think Sean did a great job explaining. You know, we want to be realistic. We want our staff to feel like they're successful. But we want them to be ambitious and also, you know, also hold high expectations of ourselves while being realistic. So for general student populations, what research states is that it's 3 to 7% annual growth is considered optimal, and 10 to 15 over 3 years. Over 3 years is recommended for high school groups. But what you're going to see in our school improvement plans is many folks are doing a little bit more lofty percentage growth this year than what you're finding here. We want to use evidence-based benchmarks. Goals should be attainable. They should be steady growth targets over time that yield sustainable progress, not spurts of success and then year 2, we don't know what happened, and then year 3, oh, this happened. We don't want to be on a erratic roller coaster ride. We want to see some steady growth over time, and hence this is why we focus on a 3-year plan. So we focus on that. And then ongoing data-driven adjustments, progress monitoring, making sure that we have multiple data points, not just one. This is why we encourage our grades K-2 teachers, even though they may not see themselves in the SBA goal, because it's their grade up. What are your walk-ins data? Early learning is really, really important. How are kids doing with our running records that's embedded in our curriculum, our reading curriculum? It is subjective, and it does take training to do that well, but it's still a data point because you actually hear a kid read. You're sitting in front of them.
It's pretty eye-opening.
Yeah. And you're marking their errors, and you're listening to them repeat words, and you can see how a kid uses context clues, right? And so it's really, really important. And so we try to make sure that we're talking about multiple points, multiple data sources, not relying on just iReady, just SBA. There's more to a child than that.
And the secondary corollary to that is that 9th grade, right? I mean, we look at the 9th grade year as a benchmark for a good 9th grade year puts a student on trajectory for graduation, which is why we're tracking 9th grade on credit, because that is the pivotal year. The research says if a kid gets through 9th grade, with all of their credits, they're going to graduate on time as opposed to
So you're gonna see that in the second goal for our secondary folks. And I think one of them, I think it may be Lynnwood High School, is gonna call out how many credits deficient you have to be to have eyes on your 9th grader. He was thinking about that, so I'm excited to see what he turns in soon. And then SMARTY goals are these, and it's defined. If you can, I won't read this to you. They're specific, measurable, etc. It's the
Here it says achievable, but in the form quantity it said ambitious.
Ambitious, achievable, ambitious. I think for me, if you're ambitious, you're gonna achieve something, and vice versa.
I'm trying to remember when we first talked about SMART goals, specific, measurable, like, action oriented, it's a lot of A's.
The A's have shifted over time. What we've seen in multiple districts is our staff giving us feedback that it's quite depressing when year after year, you're not moving the needle. And they're personally impacted. They do care, right? And so we want to make sure that they're achievable, that they have small glimpses of hope. And so over time, create more lofty goals. We can do this. We've done this. We've done 1% last year, and maybe we can do 3. And that's what it's all about, because this is hard work. And then we provided these supports for our school leaders novice school leaders, maybe it's their year one and they're not quite sure, sentence them that we often do this with our students too. Can you take a look at that? And then we gave them actual goals, if you're wondering. So you may see this kind of format. This is for elementary and middle school. This is the 3-year SIP goal. So you're gonna see the date ranges, grades, baseline 25% and where they wanna be. And the data source is SBA. This is the annual targets for elementary school. Now it's getting into the more subset groups of kids. Now they're shifting to iReady as the progress monitoring because it's taken multiple times during the year to inform your teaching. And the last one is a little bit different because it calls out a subset group.
One of the kind of cool things I've been seeing this year, I've heard people talk about, which I think is directly related to the changes we made to this, excuse me, to the SIP and maybe to the achievable part, is people talking about numbers. You know, like this idea of 10% more kids is a little bit nebulous, but when you say that is 8 of our kids in 5th grade, if we have 80 5th graders, people go, oh, like that's 2 kids in my class, who is that? Like who's, you know, I think that, and I just have heard that shift in language to, and I think it gives people hope. I think they see the kids in a different way when we're not talking about percentages.
A 1% change in grad rate at high school is 3 kids.
That's more impactful than just
Right,
saying
when
1%.
you talk about that, it's like.
Right.
it's
You
like-
No.
remove 3 kids, you're removing 1%.
Yeah.
It's much easier to think about. It's these 3 kids could do it. We used to talk even about SBA that way. Remember when people talked about borderline kids,
Yeah,
like level 2
level-
kids? that
those high level
You can
2s.
identify those
Right.
level 2 kids and say, you can move them up and you can move the level 1 into level 2.
Yeah,
Yeah,
It's kind of inspirational when you think about like, I can power through, I can get appointments with 3 more kids this week to talk to them about where they are with credits. I can do that, you know, versus like sort of more, less
The narrative
concrete.
has shifted, I think.
Yeah, I've heard a lot more of that.
well, I hope, and if we, in the action steps, it ain't gonna happen without improved instructional practice.
Right.
Because just talking about this without the improved instructional practice.
so that's the strategies.
Yeah.
That's where you see the strategies.
Yeah.
So this is his 3-year SIP goal example for high school. Graduation rate. And then these are sample, high school annual target goals that we provided as we were talking about the shift in the SIP form. So from fall 2024 to spring 2025, students who pass Algebra 1 courses will increase from 70% to 80%. The good theory of action is if you're passing Algebra 1 with success as a 9th grader, then
It's a gateway course.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions about what you've seen so far? Okay. So this is the timeline, if you're wondering. We've been talking about this since last spring because we shifted our new form. And I just want to publicly thank all of our staff, our teachers, our school leaders, and we've made some shifts in how they complete these forms and how they engage with staff. And I'm so thankful that I'm in a system where people are excited about change when it's being implemented. And so I didn't get a lot of pushback or why are you changing it again? He said SBA makes sense. At this point, it makes sense. And so October 21st is when the SIPs were due to principal supervisors. It's the rough draft, and principal supervisors, meaning Helen, we've been powering through giving feedback. October 25th was when we were supposed to return all of them to school leaders with our feedback notes. And then the final revised SIPs are due to us from school leaders on the 30th. And on the 1st, there's going to be electronic copies compiled for the Friday memo for you all. And on November 12th, you're going to have a vote.
Well, and I want to commend both of you. I've been there where we sat in groups reading all the SIPs to give feedback to principals. It is very difficult work. It is very time consuming and it's very important. And I know during this particular timeline, you guys have been under, I'm sure, a great deal of stress and pressure and really working hard.
Said, what did you
Long
say,
nights,
Greg?
long
He said,
hours. Anyway,
I'm
thank
getting
you
more
so
wrinkles
much.
and I'm aging as we speak.
Yeah.
And I said, I agree.
Anyway, I really want to acknowledge, it looks very simple, you give us this nice simple timeline. I know how much work that is from you guys, and it's amazing, so thank you very much, because it's the key piece in making sure that what comes out in terms of this is really effective, and will move the temperature forward.
Thank you. And so going to our revised new template. So if you click on the tip, you click on that, and you have the slide deck from last, so you already have that, and then of course you to make a copy, and then this is what you're going to see. When you scroll down, there's the purpose, and the purpose is the same. There's a school name, school year, and there's multiple sections, and this is our school, and they answer that question. And we didn't want a dissertation to share because they were so long. So we said 500 words or less, please. We capped it. I didn't want to have to do that. I know, so there are some sad faces in the group, and we know your schools are great, thank you. Just say it in 500 words or less. So moving on from there, and you're gonna see some tables, demographics tables. Schools do different things about our school, and I give them the autonomy to do that. If they wanna use a different kind of graph, have at it, but make sure that you talk about your demographics and who's in your school and the great things that you're doing. And then the mission and vision is from our strategic plan, so you're not gonna see different ones. They're all gonna be the same, and that's supposed to be. Some schools have a mission and vision, and some schools created their own, and some of it didn't align with our own strategic plan. So we thought, okay, we're just gonna give it to you because this is the expectation. And so, in that blue, it's not to be touched. Data and school community engagement, if you scroll down, Erin, they're in 3 buckets. This also reflects our strategic plan, equity, engagement, and instructional excellence. I added instructional. And then they just check to see which data sources they engage with. And then the reflection questions, again, 150 to 300 words.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. And they answer these questions. And you keep on scrolling down, and then this is the goals section. So you're gonna see the long-term SIP goal. Typically, it's going to be the literacy goal. And then they're not supposed to answer those questions onto the box. A lot of our school leaders started answering those questions in the blue box. They're guiding questions for you to think about. They just really want to write. I don't understand. So they're just guiding questions. So you're not going to see an answer after that. They're just questions to consider. And then here's the SIP annual 1-year SMART goal. And that's going to be iReady. And then you're gonna see a theory of action statement. If we do this, then our students will do that. And then this is the annual strategies and the ongoing work plan. And this is what we focus on during the mid-year and the end of the year. And we give feedback about, well, your strategy didn't work, so what do you do? Clearly it's not working, what are you gonna do? Or it's working, and what more of it you're gonna do? So they're supposed to list 1 to 3 key strategies. When I first came, there were so many strategies. Every strategy is under the sun, and I asked 1 to 3 high leverage ones that can be school-wide or grade level-wide or department-wide. You just can't just keep on writing everything that you do. That's small group. Yes, differentiated small group, but where does it happen? It happens during core. That matters. Right? And so that isn't actually high leverage strategy. So you're going to see specific language. What strategy or strategies, what will that look like in action? If you can't articulate that, don't use that strategy because you can't even picture it in your head. And clearly it's not happening in your school because you're unable to describe that. And then the team or person responsible. There's an accountability measure here. We want to know who is the lead for whatever strategy. It could be the principal, it could be department heads at a high school, it could be groups of teachers.
So will names be there, not just like third grade team names?
Some put names, they put titles and roles.
And I think one of the things I was happy about when I saw these changes, and I think you'll see these on most of these, even, you know, when I got here and we had our strategic plan, some of the things in the strategic plan are like, you know, have 1,000, it's not, but have 1,000 professional development offerings for staff. Like, that's fine, but it only works if something changes, right? And so you're gonna see, to your point, Nancy, about like, what are we talking about, you know, that you hopefully will not be seeing, you know, like, deliver professional development to make sure that all of the teachers have had psy-op training. And I think probably in the past, that would be something that we'd say, like, make sure everybody, instead you'll see something like,
What
all
does that look
teachers are implementing psy-op strategies in, you know, blah, blah, blah. Something that is going to actually have an impact on students potentially versus something that only interacts with adults unless we do something.
And so when we do learning logs, we can refer back to the SIP plan and say, you said this is what it's gonna look like, let's go see what it looks like.
That's perfect. Because too often these things just sit on the shelf. And so just like with the learning targets, referring back to it throughout a classroom period, we talked about the learning target, now we're working on it, same with the SIP plan. We have it, we talked about it, do we see it? Yeah,
So the promise was that this would be a living, active document for
Right.
schools.
that would be
And
lovely.
so we're constantly working towards that. And then if you scroll down, this is the progress monitoring. What evidence or data will you collect to monitor the implementation? Quality, not just the implementation, you have to think about quality. So we added quality and progress toward the SIP goal. Not just random things that, yes, I implemented, I did something, but what's the quality of it? And you should be able to articulate that, and then we go to long-term SIP goal number 2, which is 5 math for a lot of folks, or 9th grade on track for high schools, and then the form repeats. And then you go down to the 3rd goal, and that's going to be your engagement attendance, but the same format, and it repeats. Okay? So this is what you're going to be seeing this Friday. Okay, and then this is where you're gonna see Director Cramer list of names and their roles and whatnot. Great. Then if you go back to our slide deck, Erin, we're gonna show you they're due in October for our school years, but we don't just stop talking about it. It's a part of their evaluation cycle. So during their mid-year evaluation meeting, they're expected to do the mid-year SIP, reflect, and revise form. I know this is very form heavy, but we need to put things on paper and make sure that we go over it. And so the purpose of this is to make sure that we're having a conversation and making course corrections. So here's the purpose, very similar. Are students making satisfactory progress in response to our SIP strategy? And they're gonna have to answer that. Which groups are making satisfactory progress, which groups, if any, are not? So they fill this out mid-year. And then this is the part that came from a school improvement plan that our school board had, I think, some recommendations in. Our school board at that time, you know, it's a different makeup, but I think Dr. Katims, you would remember, we wanted to know how this is being shared, who is involved. Do parents know about this? Do kids know about this? So this is kind of that accountability piece right here, and it's literally a cut and paste. It's very similar from the first draft that I saw. The only thing that we kept from our old form was this section, and it's still alive and well. And instead of putting this section in our SIP form, we put it in the reflect and revise so we can talk about it twice a year. So they fill this out for school community members, students, and whole staff engagement. and I think Director Katims, your recommendation shifted staff engagement and we put whole staff, because there was some feedback, I think at that time, I don't know if you remember, just a couple folks doesn't do it. We need to know if your whole staff understands and when did you talk about it and when.
Right, not just your leadership team.
Yes, we always talk about our building leadership team made of 7 people,
Mhm.
but what about the other people?
Or sometimes 2 people.
Or 2 people, okay. So thank you for this. Came from our school board. And then we get into the goals again. So they state their goal. And then it's really strategy focused. And then if you scroll down, and it repeats for each of the 3 goals. And then if you go to our final,
Can I just make one comment?
yes,
And I know it's a done deal, but it's just maybe a pet peeve I have.
yes, share.
To have a yes/no question on something like this, are students making satisfactory progress in response to our SIP strategy? I would
Oh, it's
just-
never a yes, no.
I know, but
I
it's
think we
phrased
could
as a
add
yes,
yes.
no. If it could just be, to
I
what
would
extent?
That's what we can revise now, no problem.
Yeah, we can revise this now, it's not a done deal, so.
Okay.
if you-
I just, yes/no questions are
Yes,
very
we'll
useless
count it in
for
the
something
numbers.
like this.
But I want you to know that, yes, that it looks like, you can't just, yes, relative will not allow that, but we totally hear what you say, what
Okay.
you're saying, and we will shift that, and we can shift that,
Okay.
because it's not March yet.
I mean, hopefully
They're not
nobody
even-
would actually say yes or no
Yes.
and not elaborate, but
Yes.
it's still phrased in a way that they could.
Right, I agree with you. End of year, reflect and revise. Maybe I got so tired, I don't want to hear anymore from them. I just wanted yes or no. I don't know, that's,
Well, you can, you could put a limit on everything, limit of words.
100 words. So this is the end of the year, it's very similar. And we will definitely shift that, what you just said, with students groups are, we didn't shift all of these so that they, and I think I'm gonna cap it because I get dissertations for these 2, and it's quite difficult to read, through some of them. And it repeats, and we do this twice a year. Sometimes, they're going to shift their SMART goals. Some schools have said, I wrote that we're only going to make 2% or 1% or 3%, but wow, we already jumped 25. I have to shift this. They're telling us in March. We don't have the capacity, maybe the will, we're not gonna go to the public facing form and shift all of that. I just say, it's reported here in the mid-year reflect and revise. We're going to leave the public facing one, and that was what was approved by the board. We can't just willy-nilly change the percentages. We're gonna leave it there, but now we're gonna use the mid-year and the end of the year form to inform your next cycle. And this is why you're gonna see some jumps. In some schools have typically said, we're gonna make 2% growth by the end of, I don't know how many years. You're gonna see some jumps because they realize, wow, we've made some progress that we were not expecting. So the outward facing document looks the same as you approved, but these forms will have the real or the actual, the just-in-time shifts that we do.
Which means that starting next year, when they go back to do next year's SIP, they'll use this
They
as
use
their
this.
jumping off place.
Yes, we opened this to have that conversation. Remember the strategy, because we don't want them to write the same strategy that didn't work that well, but now they're pressed for time and they're writing it again. Now we have documentation of what worked and what didn't to guide that conversation much more better and have more accountability and follow through. And now I'm done. I apologize for going on.
Don't worry about it, we don't have to worry, we're good.
And here's some resources if you wanna get into
This is
the
important
research.
stuff.
There's a research, data source page, and it describes where that came from.
Thank you so much.
Any last thoughts?
We've done a good job of asking questions along the way, but are there any other compelling questions that people
Should we
have?
check in with Keith, just so Keith?
Keith?
Forgot I was out here. No, I thought that was a great presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Keith. Anything else?
I think this is great.
Yeah, no, I think it's really good work, and I think, it's, you know, a higher level of, rigor in terms of the expectation around progress. And at the end of the year, or, you know, next year, I really do wanna see the end of the year SBA embedded somehow in this as, and that's not hard for principals to do.
No, it's not.
Just grab it and put it in. I want to see that.
Yeah, no, and clearly there's so much thought and work that you guys, that I'm sure all of cabinet has put in, but just, I know what the amount of work you guys have put in, and thank you so much. I think it's very thoughtful. I agree that it's ambitious and definitely toward the kind of goals. It is phrased in a way that will help make a difference.
In terms of the,
Yeah, it turns up the heat. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. If you have any questions, please forward them to Rebecca and she'll relay those questions, or any ideas, things that you've seen in other districts or from your own past experience. I'd love to know what you're thinking. So if you can reach out to Rebecca and she'll forward it to me, and then we'll have conversations around how to shift it. You're a great source for us to take feedback to.
you know what's a really weird thing is that in Snohomish, where I teach, they haven't discussed data in buildings for most of the time that I've been there.
Wow.
As a principal, I was one of the few that brought it up to staff every year. That said, they're still outperforming us. We have different demographics.
Well, I was gonna say the demographics are different than ours.
Yeah, but even comparative to like demographic school,
Interesting.
Yeah.
Why do you think?
It's just it's kind of a question mark for me.
Interesting. Okay, well, that being said, this special study session at the Edmonds School District Board of Directors is adjourned at 6:15.
Thanks, guys. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, Keith, thank you. Thank you.
Well, good night, everybody. See you in 2 weeks, not Tuesday.
It gives us time.